This episode is brought to you by White Claw Surge. Great podcast pick, friend. No surprises there. After all, you're all about finding the tastiest flavors out there, just like White Claw Surge. And with big, bold flavors to enjoy, like blood orange, blackberry, cranberry, and more, it's time to go all in on taste. Unleash the flavor. Unleash White Claw Surge. Please drink responsibly. Hard seltzer with flavors. 8% alcohol by volume. White Claw Seltzer Works, Chicago, Illinois.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, your host for this episode of Under the Dome for the week of Monday, March 27th, 2023. Today, my guest is Senator Lisa Grafstein, a Raleigh Democrat. Thanks for being here, Senator.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Grafstein is a lawyer who ran her own firm for 16 years, then joined Disability Rights North Carolina, a nonprofit organization that advocates on behalf of people with disabilities. She is a freshman senator. Before we talk about legislating, why did you run? Why did you decide to run? You hadn't been in elected office before, right?
I had not, no. I really had never thought about running for office. I'd never really considered that as a path for me, but I got a call one day about a new district that was created and all the redistricting. The question was whether I was interested in running or whether I might know somebody, and I said, I definitely do not want to run, but I'll think about who might be out there. And then I hung up the phone and but eventually just started thinking about the kinds of work I've done over my career and the fact that I might be able to go and have some impact by bringing that experience to the legislature. And I kind of got to the point where I thought to myself, well, why not me? Why not take the chance to try to do this? So I jumped in with both feet and haven't looked back.
Now, what is the one thing that you didn't expect about the building that now that the session is underway that you... And we'll talk a little bit more later if we have time about your time as a freshman. But what's one thing that is kind of stuck out that you didn't know going in?
I think it's that how interactive and engaged people are across all different roles in the building. And that may sound a little Pollyanna, but it really is sort of an environment where people interact a lot and you talk to folks from all walks of life. And the media's there, the lobbyists are there, the staff is there, the members are there, and there's just a feeling of all going to the same high school, essentially. There's just kind of that camaraderie that I wasn't expecting.
I think so too, and getting to know the security, the sergeant at arms, the police there, and interact with it's like everyone's coworkers, but not. It's just an interesting place. All right, well let's talk about some of the bills that are coming up this week. When you all are listening to this on Monday, we're recording this Friday, but we assume that Governor Cooper is probably going to have some fanfare with signing the Medicaid expansion bill that passed. And of course, it's important to note that even though people say it's a simple bill, nothing is a simple bill, I don't think, and it's tied to passage of the budget. So Medicaid expansion will be passed, but not quite. So that's one thing we'll be looking out for. The other thing going on this week is sports wagering legislation. So what's your take on that? It lost by one vote last year, and it's got 50, I think Representative Sain, the bill sponsor, the Lincolnton Republican, said that it's 56 co-sponsors. Where are you on the bill?
So I'm not aware of any sort of nose counting on the Senate side yet. I'm sure somebody's out there doing that. I'm opposed to the bill, and but it's been a really interesting thing to watch sports wagering come through, in part because it's an issue where there is not an obvious partisan split. People are kind of all over the place in terms of what their thoughts are on it, and they don't really break down along partisan lines. And also that there's been sort of such a long runway for the bill. We've known that it was coming. We've known that it was going to be similar to the one last year. It's being discussed in the House, and certainly we haven't really seen it in the Senate yet. So there's just been a lot of time for people to talk about and engage around the pros and cons and the substance of the bill, which you might have noticed doesn't always happen with every bill. That it has this much time for discussion and this much debate over merits. So that to me as a freshman has been really interesting and kind of invigorating. I've really kind of enjoyed watching that unfold because it is very different than a lot of the things that come through. And, the other piece of it I think that's been interesting is watching people, including myself, try to sort through kind of competing values as they decide how they feel about the bill. And for me, those are really around, on the one hand, the idea of personal freedom, that people should just be left alone to do what they want to do. And on the other hand, ideas around consumer protection, which I think is a real consideration with regard to the sports gambling bill, because why I landed on no on the bill is that, to me, it's not really about personal freedom, because this isn't, you and I can't set up a sports betting book and become bookies and engage. It really just sets up a monopoly of out-of-state corporations to come in and use really sophisticated targeting and algorithms to engage in practices that have been really harmful in other states. So that's kind of where I went.
Is it the way the bill is set up, or do you think that the online sports betting is something that could become law in a different way than the bill is presented?
I think there's something inherent in the online piece of it, and the fact that the way that we know algorithms work now and target and engage people in behaviors that they would not necessarily freely choose. I don't know how you regulate around that. And so it's possible, I suppose, that you could. I have not seen in any other state or heard of any options that really would address the fact that this is reaching into people's lives in ways that I don't think we're really prepared for.
So it's been interesting to see between, of course, listeners, if you've been following the bill, this is just at the House side now. But last year the Senate passed it, and then the House, there was a lot of contention, debate, which it's funny that this is happening at the same time as Medicaid expansion, because I just realized I wasn't in the chamber covering that House vote last year because I was outside the chamber talking to Speaker Moore, who was recused from that vote, and about the House finally having a Medicaid expansion bill. So both those things happened in the House the same day, and then here we are. Medicaid expansion just passed, and sports wagering is coming up again. But so Representative Hawkins, who's a Durham Democrat, is he, and Representative Sain, as I mentioned, Lincoln County Republican, are talking together about how they want this. And then opposition so far on the House side from Democrats I've heard is Representative Morey, Representative Harrison, Representative Butler, talking about why they don't support it, and Republicans that don't support it. So it could be one of those bills that so many people have come on board that they do want it, and how it's going to change. And then when it gets to the floor, it may or may not. But the amendments that I heard in committee didn't go anywhere. And there's a lot of stuff in the bill. So have you looked into that? Things that aren't just about sports betting. What do you think about some of those extras in there? And
Extras like, where some of the dollars go?
Well, they're right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot in there, and I think a lot of it is sort of kind of salted in to try to demonstrate some amount of revenue and to make promises to people about where we might get some dollars. And I think I will say it's a little cynical, I think, to be looking at it that way. What we have seen in other states is that the revenue forecasts have not really come to fruition. But even if we're talking about, I think they're saying $30, $40, $50, $60 million a year at some point in the budget, that's not nothing. But on the other hand, it really has to be weighed against the consequences. And in the context of the $30 billion budget, it's not as significant. But you also, I think, see in a lot of contexts, when dollars like that come in, they tend to replace rather than supplement what we budgeted for. So the budget forecast piece of it and some of the individual payouts to different entities, I think are really, I don't find them persuasive, because from my point of view, we should be supporting the infrastructure of our state. We should be supporting the services of our state in a sustainable and logical way, and not trying to use a one-off kind of gambits to bring in dollars instead of just making the allocations because they're required and they're part of what people pay for when they pay their taxes.
Let's talk more about money and corporate taxes and this bill that you sponsored. So bring listeners up to speed on what that is, what you'd like to see.
Sure. So the corporate tax rate, under the last budget, there was a provision in the budget that will bring the corporate tax rate down to zero. It's brought it down so far from 6.9% to 2.5%, and it will continue to decrease to zero in 2030. And there's even talk now of trying to accelerate that and bring it to zero faster. The bill I filed, and there was a companion bill in the House that Representative Morey filed as well, what those would do is to say 2.5% is actually a reasonable corporate tax rate, not just us saying that, but the Chamber of Commerce has said that. So our bills would essentially just end the elimination of the corporate tax. And the reason for that is, we're talking about probably $1 billion a year in revenue at some point that's being lost because we eliminate the corporate income tax. And those are funds that could be used to fund a lot of the services that are being underfunded right now. And that Representative Maury made the important point, I think, of comparing the $1 billion in lost revenue from that with the projected, $50 million from the lottery. We have the means in place to actually have revenue that's steady and reliable. And so cutting that corporate tax would really lose us that option. And it's unnecessary. We have a really great business environment already. It's an unnecessary tax giveaway.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the taxes might be in the budget that we'll see in a couple of days and a few other things, plus what Senator Grafstein likes for the cafeteria and our picks for headliner of the week. So we'll be right back.
It's not just something you made. It's the privilege that you get to work with your hands. It's building something that serves a purpose. Proof that you have the grit to keep going. At Timberland, we understand you take your craft seriously, and we do too, which is why our products are built to the highest quality. We put in the work so you can perfect yours, with purpose in every detail and crafted with intention. Timberland, built on craft. Visit Timberland.com to shop.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm News and Observer Politics reporter Dawn Vaughan, here with Senator Lisa Grafstein. Before the break, we were talking about the sports wagering bill and corporate taxes and everything that has to do with money. And also, the House budget is coming out this week on Wednesday. Speaker Moore told reporters that it was coming. And I'll believe it when I see it. I've been excited about how early it is because of how long the budget process has been in years past. So I don't know if there'll be the phasing out of the corporate taxes. I've asked Berger and Moore repeatedly for months on where they are on taxes in the budget and if that's something that they want to speed up or just keep of what they're doing. And I think we'll probably see, my own prediction, I guess, is the usual, that the House wants higher raises and maybe not as high tax cuts, and the Senate wants higher tax cuts and not as high raises. So where are you on, and you have interest too in workers' rights in North Carolina, where are you on what pay should be? Cooper's budget proposal gave teachers and principals really big raises, about half as much for state employees and for the school support personnel like bus drivers. And of course, we have that big shortage going on now. So where are you on what you think people should make, or any other worker protections or anything else?
Right. I think the raises look big that the governor proposed because we've dug ourselves a hole, right? So we've been underpaying people, and we've kind of known that. This is not a surprise to anybody, I think. So where I'm at on that is that we really need to be working toward market rates so that we can keep people in positions. And the proof is in the pudding. We're seeing people leave. We see what's happening. It's not rocket science, and you don't have to be an economist to figure out that we're not compensating people and not valuing them the ways that we should be valuing them. So I support the governor's increases in wages. I think it's important that we get there. And I have said, and I'll continue to try to make this point, we talk about our budget surplus, but we don't really have a surplus. Well, we have our unpaid bills, right? We have not been funding things at the level that we need to fund them to sustain them in the long term. And my big concern about things like more tax cuts is we're just digging ourselves a bigger hole and creating a cliff later on down the road. So to me, I think it's great that we have a lot of businesses coming to North Carolina. We need to be able to staff those positions. I think we're going to be struggling to staff some of those positions that are coming to the state because of underinvestment. From my point of view, I come from kind of a workers' rights background in my legal practice, and what I have advocated for and going to continue to advocate for is that workers have more ability to negotiate, and part of that is around the ability to unionize, which has been curtailed in North Carolina based on some statutes that limit the ability of employers and employees to enter into certain kinds of agreements.
Right. The union membership rate in North Carolina is all the way at the bottom except for South Carolina. And there's occasionally the membership rate is a little even lower here than South Carolina, but mostly it's the Carolinas. I mean, wanting to overturn the ban on collective bargaining is something that the Democrats have tried for a while and doesn't seem to have any support. Where do you think, what is there to do that maybe there's some common ground on workers, on government workers or anyone else?
There may be, and I think it's important that we keep pushing for it and not just assume that North Carolina is always going to be hostile to unions. I think we're something around 4% of people and workers in North Carolina are unionized.
It's a little bit less.
That real-time fact.
I know. I feel like it's like around 2%. I'm not quite sure.
I was being optimistic. So the other piece of it, besides the sort of public sector collective bargaining, is there's a prohibition in our law. So in other states, if a union is negotiating with an employer, they can agree that this is a union shop and that people who join the company have to pay union dues. And so in North Carolina, we have a ban against that. So you can't actually, an employer and a union can't agree to that. And that means then that you have weakened unions because you have folks who might get a job and decide they're not going to pay their union dues, right? And that undermines the ability of the union to sustain itself. So those are called free riders. And so that's another kind of impediment. But I think this is actually a really important time in our history in that we have worker shortages. We have lots of folks trying to organize unions. You've seen it kind of across the country with things like Starbucks and other retail outlets where I think there's much more ability to bring bargaining power to the table. And so this is a good time, I think, for unions to be working toward greater ability to organize.
I was trying to look up really quick what the union membership rate is. And South Carolina at 1.7%, North Carolina is 2.8%. So, and then South Dakota at 3.1. So pretty low on the range there.
At 3.1 in South Dakota is like 20 people. That's not hot.
All right. Let's see here. So we've got the budget coming out Wednesday. We've got sports betting vote that could be, if you all are listening to this on Monday, it could be Tuesday. So we've got the Medicaid expansion bill that's going to be signed, and then what kind of surprises do you think could be in the budget? There's usually some sort of attempt of taking power away from the executive branch. Do you think we'll see some of that?
Well, that's interesting. And, as a freshman, I sort of feel constantly surprised and naive, and I'm sure that you have better guesses than I do about what might be there. What's interesting to me is about the whole idea of taking power from the governor is I'm not sure how I would feel about that if I were Mark Robinson, because either my party doesn't think I'm going to win or they don't want me to have the power. So, but that's sort of more of a political, I guess, question to the side. But so it's an interesting time for the legislature to be taking power from the governor. I don't know if that's going to be there. I know that there are fights now over things like the Board of Education and things like that, and those continue to play out. I do think we have gotten away from the level of balance of powers in our state that we've had in the past. I think we've gone too far, and I don't know what's going to be in the budget. I think that it doesn't sound like abortion will be in the budget.
Right. It could be. We'll see. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be. All right. So longtime listeners know the past month or two, I've started asking lawmakers or people that work in the building what they like to eat. So what, assuming you eat at the cafeteria or the snack bar or wherever, what do you get?
So I don't eat at the cafeteria much, but you did see me there yesterday.
That's right.
At least once. And I the thing I always get is the green beans, which are really very flavorful as far as green beans go, which is not a dramatic choice, but I'm vegan, and so I don't eat meat, and that makes the choices. When I do go down, it's really just mashed potatoes and whatever vegetables are available. And also, I realize I've just lost all future elections by admitting under the dome that I'm vegan, but that's okay.
Well, the green bean law, you'll be happy to
yes. Well, part of what I like about green beans is they remind me of those canned green beans from growing up,
They might be.
They might be. Might be the same can, in fact.
All right. Let's move on to our headliner of the week. Senator, who or what is your headliner this week?
My headliner is the Wake County School Board, because they have passed or adopted a master's pay for folks in the system who missed the cutoff for master's pay, which I think was 2013. And I think that's been a big issue. It's certainly one I've been hearing a lot about from social workers in the school system and teachers. And so I just applaud them for doing that and taking the step that I would hope that the legislature will do, which is to go back and put master's pay back in place for teachers and social workers in our schools.
My headliner is also local government. Mine is Durham City Council. They have had a lot going on lately, and it's really not just one thing that the headliner. So just overall, Durham City Council, there's a council member that's being investigated by the state. Our reporter, Mary Ellen Moore, who covers Durham, has been writing about that. This very contentious meeting that happened a few days ago. If you're listening this Monday, it was this past week. And so there's both the council member is being investigated, she's being censured for something else. And then as the meeting ended, 2 other council members, Deidreana Freeman and Mark Anthony Middleton, who's mayor pro tem now, got into an argument that the media there and anyone left in the building heard, because they started going out a different door and had some, council member Freeman had some very angry words for Middleton. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out with them working together in the future. They've been on council together since back when I covered Durham when they were running. And one thing I've noticed about Durham City Council is even when they argue, they work things out sometimes. So we'll see how that pans out as far as the council member being investigated, and that's something else. And then council also is dealing with the recent shootings and deaths of teenagers, which is just terrible, and looking for solutions there. So people are looking to the leadership. So that's my headliner. We started with state government and with local governments.
It's I think across the board, every body of government seems to kind of function in its own ways and have their own dynamics, and it's an interesting thing to watch how those things play out over time and how they affect policy.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast, Senator. I'm Dawn Vaughan from the News and Observer. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.